how can we start to destigmatize the whole idea of being laid off? Because it is more frequent than it's ever been. And it happens to the best of us, like the best of you.
One of the biggest things that I hear time and time again from people in the community is that they have a loss of self-identity, a loss of self-confidence. Imposter syndrome comes in, right? Was I really this top performer that I thought I was for so many years? If this can happen to me, then oh my goodness, it can happen to anybody, right? And so what I challenge everyone to do in their layoff experience is to think back to previous times in their lives when they had adverse situations and to pull from those experiences, because it's very much the same. You're having to just redirect yourself from a rejection, a pretty big one, of a company saying, hey, we don't want you here anymore for whatever reason. And now you have to redirect yourself to the next best thing.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long, or sense what's coming, and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
Well, hello, listeners. And I am so thrilled that we are able to bring you this conversation today, especially because we have a real legend in the house, Laura Krauss. And we're going to talk specifically about her area of expertise, which is layoffs. Not that she signed up to be the layoff queen, but she owns that title by default. But I also just want to let you know that I am here in Atlanta. I don't live in Atlanta. I'm here because of what has recently taken place with Hurricane Helene. And I am feeling like I am in the safest place in the world right now, knowing that I have the opportunity to interview Laura, who also creates safe seats for those who are in periods of transition and also as a byproduct of being laid off. So, you are the woman today. Thank you so much for being here. And Laura, please introduce yourself and share a snippet of your story in terms of how you got to be where you are today, and also the upcoming book release. You're already the author, but of the new book called The Layoff Cooties, and the wrangler, the ringleader of your community.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Lauren. I feel like this is a long time coming, and we've been chatting, I think, over the last couple of months here on LinkedIn. So it's really a privilege to be here to speak with you. And I'm so grateful that you're safe and in Atlanta with friends and family and okay from the Hurricane Helene. So hello, everybody. My name is Laura Krauss, and some people call me Layoff Laura because of my vulnerability and speaking about this kind of taboo topic that has been very popular in our headlines over the last year or two. After 25 years and a successful sales career, I found myself on the other end of a layoff last November. And I like to describe it as really a gut-wrenching and blindsiding layoff that I never in a million years thought I would ever experience. But what I've learned through that experience is that a layoff is really just a redirection to your next best chapter. And so what I've tried to do over the last 10 months or so on LinkedIn is vulnerably share what my experience has been. And so again, I found myself on the other end of a layoff after being a top performer at a sales organization where I was one of the top sales reps and then was asked to lead a top performing sales team. I was doing all of the things that I thought I was supposed to be doing and found myself on the other end of a layoff right before the holidays. And I think for me, the biggest part for me that has been most difficult has been the emotional side of losing the friendships and work relationships that I had invested so much of my time in and really felt was part of who I was throughout my career in selling. And for me, I like to say that I really, I'm sorry, Lauren, I'm just like, I need a minute here for a second.
Take it.
For me, it was the emotional trauma of losing those friendships more so than losing the W-2 of my salary. And specifically in the weeks after my layoff, when I found out that members of my team were specifically told to no longer communicate with me anymore, for me, that hurt me more so than losing my salary and what I thought was my career. And so I really started writing and journaling to try and help myself get through that hurt. And what I found was that I was really going through the stages of grief. And so my book, The Layoff Cooties, It's Them, Not You, is me weaving my layoff story through those 7 stages of grief and offering people advice through each stage on how to kind of get through what is really one of the most stressful times of anyone's life. There are actually 5 major times that folks experience traumatizing experiences, one of which is a job layoff. The other 4 are death of a loved one, divorce or separation, moving or relocation, and obviously dealing with a major illness. And so I found myself, dealing with this traumatizing event. And for me, the best way that I could deal with that was through writing. And so it started out journaling, and then it literally started through posting vulnerably on LinkedIn. And I was in such dire need of community, having gone from a fully packed schedule, of a full calendar, to literally nothing overnight, that for me, I needed to be able to find that community. And so that started out in LinkedIn by being able to post my feelings vulnerably over the last couple of months. And what happened is after I would have these very vulnerable posts, I would wake up to hundreds of DMs in my messages. And I remember off of one post specifically, I think I booked 50 meetings with people 2 weeks after that, where folks just wanted to be able to share their own layoff stories. And for whatever reason, whatever topic I was speaking in part as with that day, it resonated with them. And so I thought to myself, I can't be the only person, obviously, who's feeling these things. And as more and more people started contacting me, I started having more and more of these one-on-one conversations. And so the idea of building an online community called the Layoff Cooties Couch, which I launched in early August, is really an opportunity to bring people together to be able to share their stories and recognize that the healing process actually begins when we start sharing our stories.
So I want to stop you right there for a minute, because you have just laid out so many different facets, right? This idea that you were blindsided, right? Many, many people don't necessarily see layoffs coming. You were a top performer, right? Which meant you didn't break anything. It wasn't necessarily like a byproduct of your performance. You also shared that you went from having a lot on your schedule to nothing on your schedule, and what that felt in terms of, the contrast of having your day structured to having maybe too much time on your hands to be in a place that is very unfamiliar. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about that you mentioned was what was more painful to you was not losing the W-2. It was losing the relationship. And so each one of these also, what I want to just punctuate and put some anchors in are different elements of layoffs that most people have yet to articulate, but deeply experience. And so my question back to you, as we are going through kind of all of these iterations, is clearly there's no way to prepare for what you are blindsided for. But my question is, in the experience, how can we also start to destigmatize the whole idea of being laid off, because it is more frequent than it's ever been. And it happens to the best of us, like the best of you. So talk about that, please.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat recently that nearly 45 or 50% of the general population will experience a layoff in their lifetime. And I find that fascinating because I was 45 years old when I was laid off. And prior to my layoff, it was something that I never even thought about, right? So I think the self-awareness piece that it can potentially happen to you is huge in and of itself. But I think, the biggest difference is that, a lot of people focus on the financial aspects of losing their job, right? And I get it, right? It's important to be able to, get that next paycheck and pay your bills and et cetera. But they don't allow themselves the opportunity to grieve what it is that they actually lost. And it's not so much that they lost their job, but they lost a piece of themselves along the way too. One of the biggest things that I hear time and time again from people in the community is that they have a loss of self-identity, a loss of self-confidence. Imposter syndrome comes in, right? Was I really this top performer that I thought I was for so many years, right? If this can happen to me, then oh my goodness, it can happen to anybody, right? And it's interesting because as an empathetic leader, which I always thought that I was, I never really gave much attention to folks that were laid off previously over the course of my career, right? I always just assumed, oh, they're smart, they'll get another job, like no big deal, it happens, right? But until it happens to you, you don't really fully understand the full grasp of it and all that it impacts. I will die on this hill, Lauren, when I say, when I hear people say, oh, don't take it personally, it's just business. Having spoken now with over 500 people through my one-on-one conversations over the last 10 months, everything about a layoff is personal. And I get the mantra, right? It's kind of like when someone passes away and you say, oh, you're in my thoughts and prayers. It's like the societal thing that you say, right? But here's the thing with losing your job. It's personal because it impacts every single aspect of your life, right? Your financial, your emotional, your spiritual, your family dynamics. Like it literally permeates every aspect of your life. And I think it shows up when you are actually interviewing for jobs down the line if you haven't fully taken on the dealing with the emotional aspects of losing your job, right? And if you're not fully over those things, how can you ever move forward? And so what my layoff showed me is like, hey, this isn't the first time that I have ever experienced adversity before, right? This is just another example of that. And so what I challenge everyone to do in their layoff experience is to think back to previous times in their lives when they had adverse situations and to pull from those experiences, because it's very much the same, right? You're having to just redirect yourself from a rejection, a pretty big one, of a company saying, hey, we don't want you here anymore for whatever reason. And now you have to redirect yourself to the next best thing. And so my book, Layoff Cooties, It's Them, Not You, yes, focuses on the stages of grief from a layoff, but it's also very much a motivational and inspirational read at the end. My final 2 chapters are, how do you take that rejection and now redirect it into your next best thing? And so I provide recommendations and exercises and so forth that you can go through yourself to be able to kind of think about, okay, let's reset. What are the things that are important to me in my life at this stage? What are the things that I want to do moving forward? What do I want my legacy to really be in my next role, right? All of those things a layoff gives you the opportunity to be able to do, because you now have time on your hands that you weren't experiencing before.
So we're going to go into some of the things that your layoff has taught you that are applicable to all of us, because whether you've been through one or you've been through many, I want to say, and I've been through many myself, it doesn't get any easier, right? It's like the same thing, the same wound. You might have more tools, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the emotions don't recreate a different level of raw, right? And so for those people who are in your community, for those people who may not even know that they are at risk of being laid off, I'm curious, what some of those, walk us through some of the very early stages that say, hey, you know what? Like, it's okay, not that we need your permission necessarily, but to create a level of normalcy, or even what it is that is happening. And of course, while it may be very personal, what the upside and duration of that cycle. You talked about the 7 stages of grief, right? So here you are, like, you just got laid off very, within the past couple of days. What should you be doing? Because obviously, you're in a little bit of a spin cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And, let's just talk about what the stages of grief are in and of itself, right? And this is any type of grief. It's shock,
Sure.
denial, anger, bargaining, depression, texting, and acceptance. And here's the thing with grief. It's not something you ever get over. It's something you get through. And you can feel all 7 stages at once, very viscerally. And you can think that you've gotten through one stage only to find yourself triggered to go all the way back to the beginning, days, weeks, months, and in some cases, years later. And I love sharing the story of a woman who reached out who was laid off 10 years ago. She's been working ever since, but there are certain things that triggered her when she read some of the visceral posts that I had on LinkedIn. And she just said, I had to contact you because I thought I was over this. And I really wasn't. So thank you for now giving me the grace to know that, 1, I'm normal, and 2, it's okay to grieve what I lost, and 3, that I'm going to be okay. And so I would say the first thing is really knowing that you are not your job. And this was a huge lesson for me. And I can't say that it's something that I felt like I should have already known. But, when you said Laura Krauss, you thought sales professional. It's who I was. It's what I did for 25 years. It's where I found my most value. And that's not to say that I didn't care about being a wife and a mother and a daughter and a sister, but I just felt so much self-worth related to the success that I had in my career. And I like to say that, my job was as much a part of my identity as my big brown eyes. Like, it was just, I couldn't separate the two. And this was the first time, having always been the one to make the decision to leave jobs prior, this was the first time where I really had to take a good look at myself and say, who is Laura Krauss? Like, for someone who always cared so much about my professional legacy, like, no, I care just as much, if not more, about the personal legacy that I'm leaving behind, right? And so for me, it was a way for me to assess my transferable skills. And I firmly believe that sales, when done right, is all about helping people. And so this next phase of my career, if you will, I'm now just helping people get through their layoff, whereas I'm not working in corporate America trying to sell a product or a solution, right? So for me, I am taking my 25 years of transferable sales skills and just helping people in a much different way. So for me, that's what drives me day in and day out. My book, Lauren, really started out as a healing journey for myself, something that was really more of a cathartic release for me to be able to get down all of my feelings and tell my full story and publish it for the world. But it's really kind of taken on a much larger scope as I've been able to share that book writing journey with folks on LinkedIn. And, I'm getting ready to release this book and, couple of weeks in November. Folks will be able to go to my website and sign up for pre-orders here in mid-October. And I'm not going to lie, there's a part of me that's really nervous about it, right? And as much as I put myself out there on LinkedIn, like, this is my full story. This is my personal and my professional legacy. And that's scary, but it's also extremely empowering. And if my story, my words can help others find their words to tell their story, to me, there's no greater gift in giving back and helping people than that.
I applaud this so much. And I'm also going to play devil's advocate because there's many, many people that feel very exposed during their layoffs, right? They feel like this is not a place where they can where they can be as vulnerable perhaps as you have been and are struggling. And so one of the things that I want to ask you is, if you are not a writer, if you are somebody who may be feeling a deep level of shame, or even in just such a deep state of sadness, depression, grief, what is that first step for you? I mean, aside from normalcy, what can you do to really to heal? I mean, is there a kind of go-to, or is that completely off limits?
Yeah, no, I love this question because I recognize not everybody is going to take to LinkedIn and post their thoughts vulnerably. Not everybody is going to write a book, and maybe not everybody is going to journal, right? Especially if you don't consider yourself a quote unquote writer, as you said. I think what's really important though is to find somebody that you can talk to, that you feel safe with. And if that's someone in your family, if it's in your friend group, great. But what I've found in those circumstances is that only gets you so far, because they're there for you from a different resource perspective, right? They're your family. They're going to love you no matter where you work, all that good stuff.
Sure.
But to be able to surround yourself with other people who have actually experienced the same, that's where I feel the real healing takes place. And for a lot of people, what I found is in having these one-on-one conversations with people who did reach out in the DMs, for them, just being able to get the words out, even if it's only one time, is extremely healing. And again, to have the ability to share that with someone who has experienced it as well is what I found to be extremely encouraging and supportive. And that's really what we're finding in our community too. It's very interesting, with 75 members just in these first couple of weeks of launching, there are different subsets within the community, right? There are people who join just for the coaching sessions because they like that group environment and they want to get that knowledge base from the visiting coaches. There are people that just participate in the writing prompts because that's where they feel the safest to be able to share their stories. And then there's a percentage of people who are just in there to read and, well, let's call it lurk, right? And see what other people are positioning and talking about. And at first, Lauren, that bothered me, but I've learned to recognize that that's part of their healing journey too. And who am I to look down upon the way in which they feel the best way is to heal, right? So I'm learning a lot in and of myself, just hosting this community and administering this community and seeing really the full spectrum of people's healing journeys. So I think whether you choose to write about it or talk about it, you need to be able to get the words out. And the more opportunities you have to do that, the greater your ability to heal from it over time will be. And I tell people all the time, like, I don't think I'll ever get over my layoff. And I think that's okay. But I don't plan on staying in that space of shock and denial and anger and depression, etc. Right? Like, that's where it's unhealthy. But giving yourself the grace to know that it is okay to have time in those stages is extremely important. And I think for some people, it's just they need to understand that that's normal and okay first to be able to go down that path later.
I want to also talk specifically about some of the ahas that you found with some of the subsets within the layoff community that you have come to know through your own and maybe even through LinkedIn on the DMs, because some of what you shared is that the proportion of people, at least who are landing in your community, were not what you thought, number one. And number two, that there's also some through lines that you're identifying with the level of age that they're in or circumstances that they have. So if you could just speak to that, because I think it's important to know that the way we look at layoff, or the way that we may have previously looked at layoff, isn't necessarily what's really happening now.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think the greatest thing that we talk about within the community is mindset. And I think for, a lot of these people who are joining the community have been out of work for 9, 10, 11 months, over a year. And for them, they're not looking for the technical of, hey, how do I, improve my resume kind of stuff. They've already gone through those stages. They know what they need to do there, or maybe they're even working with a coach in that capacity. But it's really a lot around mindset. And I talk about this specifically in the bargaining chapter, like my book, where I talk about what if versus imagine if. What if tends to have a negative connotation of like worry, fear, and doubt. Like, what if I didn't say this to my manager just 2 weeks prior to my layoff? What if I hadn't done that, right? And we can live in this world of what if scenarios that at the end of the day doesn't change what happened. So why go there, right? So instead, do a mindset shift to imagine if, which is a lot more positive, thinking about the possibilities and the creativity and the future of what can be. What if my speaking up about pay inequity now creates an opportunity for the women that followed me to be in a much better position than I was throughout the course of my career, right? Imagine if my speaking out actually had a positive realm of change for that, right? Or instead of what if, I didn't spend so much time mentoring all these women in the sales organization, was that all for nothing? Instead of imagine if they're able to take the things that we worked on together for years and can now mentor the next generation of sales reps for the better, right? And so just that simple reframe makes people recognize that, the time they had at their job did mean something. It wasn't all for nothing, right? And as they figure out what they're going to do next, having that same mindset shift is also very important. So I think for me, we're starting to do a lot of like personal and professional development sessions within our community too. And so we have this series called Sharing is Caring on Thursdays, where folks get on and obviously share their stories, but we also do personal and professional development exercises amongst the group too. And I found that to be probably one of our more popular meetings, if you will, throughout the community.
So I love what you just shared, right? This imagine if, and what other kind of reframing has really helped to heal the audience, because a lot of what you've shared with me even before this conversation is that many of your members and many folks who are going through layoffs are also have a heightened concern about their age. And many of them have not been in a job search for a long time. So these things start to pile up, or, the fear has amplified effect, right? Because it's not just, ooh, I have a layoff. It's like, ooh, and there's this, and then there's this. So help me understand and help our audience understand how to start to digest and then also insert levels of hope into that process, even if you aren't in the community, even if they've never read, sadly, one of your amazing posts or haven't gotten your book yet.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you can't change how old you are, right? So why hide that? So I'm all about kind of calling out the elephant, if you will. So lead with that. Lead with your experience. Like, don't fear it. Like, you've done some amazing things over the course of your lifetime through your various throughout your career. There are ways in which you can highlight that come across in a positive way that isn't coming across as like a know-it-all. I've been there, seen there, done that, all that, right? So again, I think it just goes back to the mindset and controlling the narrative of the story that you're telling. And until you're in that right mind space, yeah, you have to be congruent with what the narrative is in your own mind before you can start communicating that to somebody else, right? I like to say everybody is in sales, right? We're all selling a part of ourselves to somebody else, no matter who we interact with, right? And so coming up and reframing and framing your story and telling your story in the best possible way is really the thing that's going to position you the most to get that next job. And I think for a lot of folks who find themselves dealing with ageism and really in this boat for the first time, they haven't had to create their own story for so long because they were so complacent in their job that they had for 10, 15, 20, 25 years, right? So this is the first time that they're having to now sit down and say, okay, what is the story that I want to tell? How do I want to frame this, not just for myself, but for other people, right? And people can feed off of that, right? They can see if you're not confident. They can see if you have imposter syndrome, like the whole fake it till you make it thing just doesn't work, right? So, I think the important part is really figuring out what your own story is and being really good at telling that.
I concur, and I also support, because a lot of the folks that we work with in Portfolio Rocket, this is the first time that they have ever had to actually take the lead on their own job search, meaning they're not reliant on a recruiter to tell their story. And they know that the applicant tracking system isn't necessarily going to work in their favor. And so how do you, in your layoff community, how do you address the question? I mean, we have our own POV around, well, what do I say when this question comes up about how I was laid off in my last job? Or in networking conversations, how do you help them to balance the truth with also, staying in a place where they are viable, marketable, confident in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think it comes down to really, like I said before, like practicing what that story is. And for a lot of people, they haven't actually said the words out loud. So one of the things that we're going to be doing actually in an upcoming session is kind of doing a round robin where people kind of give their pitch, if you will, their 30-second spiel on themselves, and helping identify things that we're seeing from what they're saying. Is their voice cracking when they tell a certain part of their story, or is there something that they're not as confident in that maybe they thought they were? The other part of it is like, don't just go with what you think the story is. Talk to other people who actually worked with you for 10, 15, 20 years, right? Because the narrative that you tell yourself of who you think you were to work with might be a little bit different than the people who actually worked with you, right? So why not get some of those stories, the positive, stories that are out there about who you were and how you were to work with from the people directly to be able to share as part of your narrative as well, right? So it's not so much of, this is what I think about myself. This is what my peers have said about me in the decades that they worked with me as they found me to be X, Y, Z, right? So again, it all comes back to the storytelling. And, whether you're doing that first through writing to get it down on paper, or whether it's the conversations that you're having with yourself. Another great exercise that I do, I've shared this on LinkedIn before. I learned this early in my sales career when I was dealing with my own imposter syndrome, my first year of selling in software sales. Stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you're a 10. You're a 10, you're a 10, you're a 10, and say it until you believe it. And I thought this was like the dumbest exercise until one of my senior sales execs shared it with me that at her tippy top level, it's something that she did when she felt she was in positions that were in over her head. And I'll tell you, there were days where I was there for 30 seconds and the exercise did what it was supposed to do. And then there were other days where I was there what felt like 30 minutes because I just wasn't believing it yet, right? But you have to be confident in who you are and in what you represent and the story that you're telling. And that's going to then come out and inspire other people to want to work with you and connect with you.
Laura Krauss, I am so grateful that you took this risk and put yourself out there on LinkedIn and have expanded that to a community of people who are in the safest seat and have a place to go to process and to heal and to move on. And I'm honored to be a part of it and to call you a friend. Congratulations on your upcoming book. We will include all the links below in the show notes. But in the meantime, make sure that you follow Laura on LinkedIn she is the layoff queen, although she, again, didn't necessarily have to like assign that to her. It came by default, but also, like so many things, it's helped her and is helping others in her community to really become different versions of themselves, maybe not the ones that they had expected, but definitely the ones that they can leverage and be true to. So thank you all for listening today. And if you like this episode and other episodes of Career Blast and a Half, please go ahead, subscribe, and write a review for our podcast, because this is a way for us to be able to bring these conversations to each and every job seeker, regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're in transition or not, because we don't know when layoff is going to show up, and we don't know when a lot of things are going to change. So get ahead of those conversations and continue to join us. So thank you so much, Laura, and I'll see you on the LinkedIn streets.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.